Here are various thoughts I have regarding moral philosophy. First of all, I suspect that long-termism, at least forms of it with non-arbitrary values, may imply a form of utilitarianism. To elaborate, if you have some sort of terminal values, you need to ground them somehow. You need some epistemological system to determine what your terminal values should be. There are a number of ways you can do this. Well, first of all, in the case of pleasure and suffering, the inherent goodness and inherent badness of these things is directly observable. These things, it's self-evident that they are autoteleologically good and bad in the way that, as far as we know, other values aren't. The second way you can derive your values is based on instincts, which is what I think most normal people do. Although, with instincts seem to be inherently short-termist. Suppose that you have instincts that compel you to act in a non-utilitarian way. I mean, there's an inherent trade-off in this situation. I mean, if you're a sentient being with qualia and you will do something that will cause you suffering, I mean, that will be inherently bad to you. And thus, there's a trade-off. So if you have this instinct-based system, that means you're valuing your instincts above the long-term utilitarian things that are self-evidently good. And thus, since you're valuing your short-term instincts more, it's short-termist in a sense. A third way you can axiomatically ground your values is essentially just by admitting that values are arbitrary. Although this is kind of a non-starter because it just admits that you don't have any basis for them. A fourth way you could potentially ground your values is by appealing to an agent smarter than you. Suppose that you know about some agent that you believe is far smarter than you, and as a result has some way of determining what the objective morality is. And if you have good reason to believe this, based on Aumann's agreement theorem, you could argue if they believe that something is objectively right or wrong, that is evidence that it is. But the thing is, as far as we can tell, there are no beings like this. Another issue in moral philosophy is, I think there's sort of a bootstrapping problem between what I call primitive values and complex values. So, primitive values are things like pleasure good, suffering bad. Complex values are what I call complex values, or what are well thought out utility functions or moral systems that determine how you should act, like Jeremy Bentham's felicific calculus. But the thing is, I mean, I'm not sure if pleasure bad or pleasure good, suffering bad necessarily gets you all the way to therefore Bentham's felicific calculus is good. Because the thing is, there are trade-offs, and you could argue that you could give different moral weights to the different trade-offs you could make while still maintaining that pleasure is good and suffering is bad. Although in the case of long-termism, I mean, long-termism by definition says that you should value the far future as much as the near future. So if you have a weight based on things in the near future, that by definition wouldn't be long-termist. What else? I mean, you could argue one way you could possibly bootstrap complex values from simple values or primitive values is essentially through inductive reasoning. Maybe you could believe that something like Bentham's philosophic calculus is the moral system that is the closest to pleasure good, suffering bad. Therefore, you could argue based on inductive reasoning, if you accept that inductive reasoning is valid, that something like Bentham's philosophic calculus may be your best guess on what the objectively correct moral system is. Although the thing is like with the issue of like infinite ethics. So if you have some other way that isn't utilitarian, that's say instinct, like you'd have, if you value things other than the infinite future, you would essentially have to give infinitely more weight to these short-term things. Another thing is, for the bootstrapping issue I talked about, it might only apply to things where there are trade-offs, where like you could create, say, more pleasure or less suffering somewhere else, but less pleasure and more suffering in somewhere else. But the thing is, if it's completely unambiguous and there are no trade-offs at all, such as like go to heaven or go to hell, I'm not sure if it would really apply here. I mean, you could argue, like, just through, like, say if you value, say, moment A, if you think that moment A being pleasurable is better than moment A being painful, and you believe the same thing for moment B and moment C and moment D, valuing this infinite amount of pleasure above the infinite amount of pain is just the compound of all of those things. So I'm not sure if the the issue with giving different moral weights to things is really relevant for that. But I think that's about all the thoughts I have for now.